The Bad Island by William Steig. A childhood favorite, read by Pipes McGee. There once was a very unbeautiful, very rocky, rotten island. This island had many active exploding volcanoes, some of which not only belched fire and smoke and coughed hot lava, but spat poison arrows and two-headed horned toads. The island was full of jagged, broken cliffs and acres of sharp gravel. Poison ivy was growing there, and all sorts of thorny, spiny, cactus-like plants, some of which resembled barbed wire. None of these plants ever had flowers. There was an earthquake an hour, and also violent tornadoes, lightning sprees, with racking thunder, squalls and dust storms. The sun burned scorching hot, and everything was radioactive. At night, it was always freezing cold. Every night, almost everything on the island turned to hard ice. All the creatures and all the plants became stone cold and motionless. But the volcanoes went on exploding, and the lightest breeze was a 100-mile-an-hour hurricane. In the morning, everything quickly thawed out in the sudden sun. Surrounding this rotten, horrible island was a boiling sea, seething with serpents and sharp-clawed crabs, stingrays, electric eagles of very high voltage, and eerie, ugly fish with pointed teeth, barbed fins and scales, and fluorescent lights that flashed on and off in the dark, bubbling deep. The inhabitants of this rotten, horrible, awful, burning hot, freezing cold, and rocky island were monstrous creatures of one crazy kind or another, the ugliest imaginable, enormous or dwarfed, stretched out long or miserably stunted, horribly fat or wretchedly skinny, and they all had more horns than they should have had, growing in more places than they should have grown, with scales or warts or pimples or tentacles or talons or fangs or extra eyes, arms, legs, tails, forked tongues, all in various awfully unbelievable combinations. Many had iron armored-plated bodies full of tacks and rusty nails, and some had wheels instead of legs. No two of these creatures, not even brothers and sisters, were ever alike. The insects there could get as large as elephants, goggly-eyed with chopping mandibles, bug-eyed and hairy, with dangerous stinging tails, hard clacking shells, and they were frequently covered with grit and stuff that looked like sauerkraut. In short, there was no shortage of anything ugly. The rotten island creatures lived on meat or vegetables, and some ate both. The meat-eating ones ate each other, and also ate the sea creatures, unless the sea creatures ate them first. The vegetable-eating ones ate the poison ivy and all the thorny plants that thrived in the burning sun and the icy nights. For dessert, they all ate gravel. Since they had plenty of plants and plenty of one another, no one ever went hungry. Whenever two of these horrid creatures passed each other, crawling or slithering on the strand, they invariably hissed or snarled, or spat, or shot a bit of flame in one another's direction. This was their form of greeting. They were vain, and they were jealous. They could spend hours admiring their own ugliness, and they resented it if someone else seemed uglier. Some lived inside the active volcanoes and liked nothing better than to bathe in hot lava and spend the rest of the day cooling off by lying on hot embers in the broiling sun, having ugly thoughts, dreaming up new ways to hurt, or planning how to get even for something that had never happened. Others liked to bathe in the boiling sea, spreading their poison in the water, surrounded by sea serpents who spread some poison too. Nothing would make one of these creatures shake so hard with laughter as to see another one suffering in pain. Now, they loved the life they lived. They loved hating and hissing at each other, spitting fire, making clouds of smoke, tearing and breaking things, screaming, grunting, roaring, caterwauling, and giving vent to any kind of jarring noise that expressed their hideous feelings. They were very happy being unhappy, and were very pleased to be mean and cruel, to terrify and give each other bad dreams, to smell bad and be disgusting. To them, this rotten island was paradise. One day, out of nowhere, a remarkable flower miraculously appeared, growing in a bed of gravel. It was extraordinarily beautiful, large, with blushing petals. The first ones to see this marvel were a red-eyed, six-horned sort of toad and a six-eyed, slimy sort of lizard. It made them afraid at first, and then insanely angry. They panted fire and made terribly threatening sounds, but somehow they did not dare touch this large, gentle flower. None of the plants on this island had ever grown flowers, and they had never before seen anything beautiful. But to them the flower was ugly. They admired what was really ugly, and the first really beautiful thing they saw, this strange flower, which just grew there quietly looking its best, threatened and irritated them. Soon everyone heard about the flower and came to see it. And everyone was angry. Everyone roared loudly and hissed, clawed, pummeled the ground, breathed flame and smoke, and everyone was afraid. They wanted to be rid of the flower, to have it out of their sight and thoughts forever, but all were too terrified to touch it. Then another beautiful flower grew in another place, and then still another, at the foot of a volcano. A creepy coriander who saw this one, a delicate pink posy. He went out of his mind. He ran raving all over the island, up and down and in and out of the volcanoes, cursing and spitting flame at everything he passed, until at last he fell off a cliff, and he lay in a coma for 2 days and 2 nights, after which he got up and ran raving again. The creatures grew more and more suspicious of one another. They slunk around, disturbed, depressed or delirious, and they began blaming one another for trying to upset the natural order, the order of things on their rotten island paradise. The sort of dragons blamed the sort of insects. The sort of serpents blamed the sort of goblins. The 100-legged gremlins said that the hop-headed ogres had, by magic and for spite, planted the beautiful flowers and made them grow, and that they only pretended to be upset like the others. A hairy grapeling decided to spy on a gremlin at night to see if it was he who had planted the flowers. He hid outside the gremlin's grotto, but when night came, he was frozen stiff, along with everything else, and he never satisfied his burning curiosity. There were many such incidents, and the island was in an ever-increasing uproar. A few more flowers grew here and there. More insults than ever were hurled back and forth. More fire was spat. Their whole style of life was threatened, and they were dreadfully nervous, having conniption fits and the worst kind of nightmares, the kind even they didn't enjoy. They were paralyzed with forebodings of what might happen next. It got so the worst thing one creature could do to another was try to push him into a flower. This made them hysterical with fright and savagely mad with indignation. Eventually things really got out of hand, or out of claw and talon. From blaming and cursing and insulting and threatening and shoving and hitting, they went on to serious fighting, and all their deepest demons of hate broke loose. They began warring in earnest. They warred without sides in a wild battle royale. It was every rotten one for his own rotten self against every rotten one else, and there was no safety anywhere. Every rotten one was equally upset and equally outraged and uncontrollable. And every rotten one bit, clawed, snorted fire, spat poison, threw rocks, hurled hot lava and exploding embers, and shrieked and barked and screamed and flung themselves ferociously, one rotten one at another, inflicting awful damage with every move. The sun burned hotter than ever, and when freezing night came with its terrible wild winds, the battle was frozen solid until morning, when it thawed out and started all over again. It went on and on and on, and one day it was finally over. Everyone had succeeded in killing everyone else off. The last ugly ogre had given his last ugly gasp, and the last serpent breathed its last flame, and the island was a gigantic heap of dead, scaly, thorny, fanged, horned, bug-eyed, barbed, bristling, saw-toothed carcasses, lying in ashes and embers, burning and giving off a dark, horrible smoke. And then there was nothing but hot ashes. Rain came, first pelting down in a savage deluge, then gently, a tender spray, a mist of steady falling droplets. It rained all through the night, and for the first time, there was no freeze. At dawn, the rain stopped. The rotten island was no longer a rotten island. Where all the fearsome creatures had burned and given up their grisly ghosts, there were now flowers of all possible kinds, each one as lovely as the rest. The ugly sea creatures had fled, and the sea was now serene, a clear, clean blue. And over this flowering paradise, the heavenly bright sky was spanned by a glorious rainbow. And it wasn't long before the first birds came to see the new, beautiful island. The end.